river overflows, but it's just absorbed by the parks nearby. In the low rain season, these parks become beautiful places for residents to occupy. The second study from Europe, so they were ranked number 3. They're a pretty strong leader in climate resilience, and actually the only group they're not affiliated with yet is the Carbon War Room. I believe some of the executives from the Carbon War Room are on this call, and I suspect sooner or later they'll be working with Barcelona as well. Have a pretty robust train system, a rail system, and of course part of the AVE system in Spain, which is the rapid train system. The webinar yesterday, just observing Kunstler speak about where these are going, and it's interesting that he said yesterday that he thinks that the ship has sailed for any city who might be interested in embracing or adopting high-speed rail, because one of the participants in the call asked him what he thought about high-speed rail in the U.S. He thinks it's too late for that. I sure hope it's not, but obviously the cities and countries that have already made the investment in infrastructure are reaping the benefits. What most famous for in this space is being a real innovator with their solar thermal ordinance, all buildings of a minimum scale to actually embrace solar thermal. And aside from this impressive growth in adoption of solar thermal technology in Barcelona, what the statistics I found most interesting is that 35 municipalities in Spain have now adopted the solar thermal ordinance. So what it says is that cities are really in a position to be leaders to promote adoption of technology and mitigation adaptation solutions. And once they do and they show it can work, it can spread wildfire. And so they have to really innovate and create a new approach to mitigation adaptation that can then be sort of adopted by communities within their own country and then around the globe as well. On did have a very rigorous, within their climate action plan, they had a very rigorous set of proposed strategies. And what they did is they did a whole host of strategies. Some were mitigation, some were adaptation. And we all know there are lots of strategies that have the potential to serve and support mitigation and adaptation action. And so they recognized that, and they had a pretty robust set of strategies, as well as a recognition of who stakeholders are that need to be engaged to move these strategies forward. So, a pretty strong leadership. They were not signatories to the Cancun Pact and certainly not active members of the Carbon War Room. I include as a secondary leaders, you see on all these first slides introductions to every city. I have 2 leaders that I personally found interesting or I thought were important, and of course usually the mayor is one of them. And here I also included Jan Paulin, the executive director of the Stockholm Resilience Center, because the research they're doing is pretty interesting, and they have a very global perspective from that research center. It's affiliated with a bunch of universities and other agencies within the Stockholm area, but they're doing some really interesting work around promoting resilience around the world. Transit and density, they have 7 lines, 100 stations, 105 kilometers. They have over 1 million riders per day, so they're pretty active transit users in Stockholm. Very low GHG per capita. I think they're right behind Copenhagen and Curitiba on that. And the second, they in the study that actually have a carbon neutral goal, in this carbon neutral by 2050. And as you can see, here's an image from a district heating program in Stockholm, where you see 69% of households have access to district heating. More than anything else, they weren't doing much from what I could tell on planning for adaptation, but about 40% of their mass for Stockholm is actually dedicated to green space and park space. That's just unheard of. And as you can see, by far and away #1 in my study. Now I'm proud resident right now. I did all my best to not let my own biases come into the study, but because all the data was, you know, the numbers I used the math formulas with whatever ratings I had, and Vancouver came out 5th in the study, but they were actually 1st in North America. Many of you know that Vancouver is moving forward on a plan to become the greenest city in 2020. And very strong leadership with Mayor Robertson, who's very committed. In fact, they just came out, and perhaps David Kevin can speak to that briefly, just coming out now with a program for water metering, for example, which they're hoping will result in a 30% reduction in water consumption in the city. And here you see that Vancouver has committed to every key member group that I've identified as leaders. The only they're not part of yet is the C40 city initiative. However, I've been told that the application is in review by C40 right now. Vancouver, pretty strong transit system. We obviously have a lot with our SkyTrain. We added a new line here in Vancouver recently, and that was part of the work leading up to the Olympics, the 2010 Olympics. So visitors could come and drive into the airport and get to downtown without having to get in a vehicle. Still a lot more work to do, and obviously Vancouver's a West Coast city, is later to develop, and it's not. We don't have a rigorous, you know, New City subway program here. We do some BRT activity, although not as robust as you'd find in a city like Bogota or Curitiba. To promote bike paths, and in fact, he's been a little bit under some of the leading initiatives he's been introducing, such as more bike paths in downtown, and some people are concerned it would impact business because it removes some parking spaces. So going to take a lead on those things. Lowest GDP per capita in North America. Strong reduction targets, and of course a number in my study in terms of percentage of energy sourced from renewables. Vancouver is an advantage maybe because we have access to so much hydropower from the provincial organization called BC Hydro, but Vancouver itself is doing a lot to promote renewables and the adoption of district energy. It's right near where I happen to be sitting right now. Then on adaptation, you can see where we rank on parks. There's still a lot of work to go in Vancouver to build robust adaptation planning. And of course, we are one of the lower elevation cities in the study. Also, you know, sea level. Our airport has been deemed to be at risk, of course, with rising sea levels in Richmond. So we have plenty of work to do on adaptation in Vancouver. Up again, we go. Paris here. They're pretty active leaders in a European marketplace. See, they're not members of ICLEI. Maybe my Mike here can explain that. They're the only city in my that wasn't an ICLEI member. Currently involved with the Carbon War Room. Strong, obviously, bike sharing, one of the oldest bike sharing programs in the world. And just a couple months ago, or last month, I think it was, celebrated 100 million trips have been taken via bike sharing system. Of course, the system is a good example of a program that's now going to be embraced and adopted by cities around the globe. 5.2, reasonable targets on reductions, although I've seen better. And one thing that is noticed recently after doing a lot of research is that they actually have a lot of capacity for geothermal. So there's a bunch of geothermal research and, in fact, some early stage projects going on in Paris, including this one at the airport, which is to generate 1/3 of the hot water needs for the airport from geothermal. Paris actually does have plans in place. The Heat Waves plan. They have adapting their buildings, plan program where they're planting a lot of trees and roofs, and work on flood prevention. So as far as a lot of the cities I studied, they were actually further along than most in terms of thinking through and actually beginning implementation of adaptation. Second highest rated city in North America in my rankings, and in fact they scored #1 in my U.S. cities ranking. They have leadership in San Francisco and in California for a long time, so it's not surprising to see them show up high on these rankings. One thing that might look weird is there's a little small check next to Cancun Pact, the Mexican Pact there. That's because San Francisco is a member of the U.S. Mayors for Climate Change, and that group actually signed the pact in Cancun, but San Francisco themselves as a city did not. And a couple cities from the U.S. that did independently sign that pact. So also that's why they have a half of a check there. The system, the BART is a great network. I've been on the BART many times, and they're also moving forward with a lot of things, including they're one of the early cities, and I think maybe the first in North America, to start dialoguing with and exploring pilot projects with Better Place. I assume you know Better Place. Shai Agassi founded that company. It's now worth over $1 billion. There are projects in Israel and Japan. They're going to do one in Hawaii. And they're basically working to implement a battery infrastructure system to more rapidly facilitate the adoption of EV vehicles in cities. One of the higher ones in our ranking on GHG per capita, they have pretty aggressive goals, an 80% reduction by 2050. There's a lot with renewables. On the left here, you see a solar map that it's really interactive solar map showing where they have solar installations in homes and buildings around the city. They also adopted something that's pretty innovative, which is that's their former Mayor Newsom, who did a lot around climate change, launching a pilot project, which is it's a hybrid solar wind street light system that uses both solar and wind power, and some of them have the lights and the solar and wind right integrated in the same device. Some work adaptation. Actually, the thing that impressed me most with San Francisco is doing a lot of work exploring food security. And why I was so impressed by that is that San Francisco is obviously a very developed city in a developed country, and while all our cities around the globe have issues with hunger and security, just talk about food security, we first think about cities and communities in developing countries, and to see them be as aggressive in exploring what their existing food insecurity issues are and what they will be in the future. Even though, as you can see from this most recent report, it came out a few months ago, they're saying it's on the rise, food insecurity. It's not that they've solved the problems yet, but obviously you can't solve a problem you haven't recognized. And San Francisco recognizes it's an issue, and they're working to find solutions to it. Neil Bloomberg is the chair of C40, and again, a really good demonstration of how it doesn't matter what your political affiliation is. If you understand the issues about climate change